I still remember the laughter that echoed through the corridors that day. It was sharp, cutting, and aimed right at me. "You don't belong here," someone sneered, and a chorus of agreement followed. I tried to focus on the dusty track beneath my feet, the sun glaring down mercilessly, but their words lingered, like a thorn embedded in my skin. I wasn't the fastest, the strongest, or the most coordinated, but I wasn't there for them. I was there for me. From a young age, the world seemed determined to put me in a box labeled unfit. It started with gym class in school, my least favorite hour of the day. I was the last one picked for teams, the one who tripped over hurdles, the one who couldn't do a single pull-up no matter how hard I tried. Teachers sighed, classmates smirked, and I felt smaller every day. "Sports aren't for everyone," they'd say, as if it was meant to be comforting. But their words only fueled my growing resentment. Not toward them, but toward myself. The worst part wasn't the external judgment. It was the internal voice that began to echo louder than theirs. "Maybe they're right," it whispered. "Maybe you're just not cut out for this." I stopped trying. It was easier to avoid the humiliation, to fade into the background where no one could see me stumble. But even in hiding, I couldn't escape the sting of their words. The label unfit followed me everywhere. At school, at home, even in my dreams. It wasn't just about sports. It seeped into every corner of my life. My grades were average, my social skills unremarkable, and my confidence nearly non-existent. I began to think of myself as a spectator in life rather than a participant. It was as if I was watching everyone else move forward, achieving milestones, while I remained stuck in place, weighed down by invisible chains of self-doubt. But one day something shifted. It was a small moment, almost imperceptible, but it planted a seed. I was sitting alone on a bench, watching a group of runners practicing on the track. They were focused, determined, their faces etched with effort. I envied their drive, their commitment. For the first time, I wondered if that kind of focus and determination was something I could cultivate. Not for anyone else, but for myself. That night, I decided. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I dug out an old pair of sneakers from the back of my closet, their soles worn and cracked, a testament to how little they'd been used. I laced them up and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun set. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and anticipation. I took a deep breath and started running. Well, running might be an overstatement. It was more of a jog or perhaps a shuffle, but it was movement, and that was enough for me. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, and my mind begged me to stop. But I didn't. With every step, I felt a tiny spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next day, I did it again. And the day after that. Each time it was just as hard, if not harder, but I began to notice small changes. My legs grew stronger, my breath steadier, and the voice in my head, once so critical, started to soften. Instead of "you can't," it began to whisper, "maybe you can." Weeks turned into months, and I started to see myself differently. I wasn't unfit. I was a work in progress. The world's labels no longer defined me. I was defining myself. Progress wasn't linear, and it wasn't easy. There were days when my body felt like lead, and my mind was a battlefield of self-doubt. The whispers of the past, those taunting voices from school, the smirks of disbelief from others, still lingered. On those days, I wanted to quit. But then, something inside me would stir, a quiet but persistent reminder of why I started. I wasn't running to prove them wrong. I was running to prove myself right. As my runs grew longer and my steps more confident, I started setting small goals. The first was simple: run a mile without stopping. It took weeks, and there were moments I thought I'd never make it. But the day I did, I felt an indescribable surge of pride. For the first time, I saw myself as capable of more than I'd ever imagined. The journey wasn't just physical. It was mental and emotional, too. I began to realize how much power I'd given to the opinions of others. Their words, their judgments, they had dictated my view of myself for years. But now, as I pushed through each run, those opinions started to lose their grip on me. I was no longer running away from their voices. I was running toward my own. I still remember the first time I dared to run at the local park. It was a popular spot, bustling with seasoned athletes and fitness enthusiasts. My heart raced as I stepped onto the track, feeling the familiar sting of insecurity creeping in. What if they stared? What if they judged me? But then, I reminded myself of how far I'd come. I didn't need their validation. With that thought, I started running. At first, I felt their eyes on me, or maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks. Either way, I focused on the rhythm of my steps, the sound of my breath, and the cool breeze against my skin. Slowly, the world around me faded, and all that mattered was the path ahead. Over time, I noticed something unexpected. People weren't judging me, they were encouraging me. A nod of acknowledgement here, a smile there, even the occasional "you've got this" from a fellow runner. It was a stark contrast to the ridicule I'd faced in the past. These strangers didn't care where I'd started. They saw where I was going. One day, an older man approached me after my run. His face was weathered, his hair silver, but his eyes held a youthful spark. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice kind. "You remind me of myself when I started. Keep at it, you're doing great." His words stayed with me, not because I needed the praise, but because they symbolized how far I'd come. The girl who once avoided gym class, who dreaded physical activity, was now being recognized as a runner. As I continued to push my limits, I began exploring other challenges. I signed up for a 5K race, a decision that both terrified and excited me. The idea of competing, of putting myself out there, felt like a giant leap. But I knew it was a leap worth taking. Race day arrived, and with it came a whirlwind of nerves. The starting line was a sea of people, each seemingly more experienced and confident than the last. I felt out of place, a lingering remnant of my old insecurities. But then I remembered why I was there. This wasn't about winning or beating anyone else. It was about proving to myself that I could. When the starting gun fired, I took off, my heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and determination. The first mile was the hardest, as doubts crept in and my legs protested against the unfamiliar pace. But as I settled into my rhythm, something shifted. I wasn't focused on the people around me or the time ticking away. I was focused on each step, each breath, and the realization that I was doing it. Crossing the finish line was a moment I'll never forget. I didn't come in first or even in the top half, but I finished. And for me, that was everything. The girl who had been labeled unfit had just completed a race. The weight of that accomplishment was overwhelming, filling me with a sense of pride I'd never known before. It wasn't just a physical victory, it was a reclamation of my identity. For years, I had let others define who I was, what I could do, and where I belonged. But now I was rewriting my story one step at a time. After crossing that finish line, something inside me awakened. A hunger not just to survive but to thrive, to shatter every expectation others had placed on me. Completing the 5K was a milestone, but it was just the beginning. I wanted more. More challenges, more growth, and more opportunities to redefine what I was capable of. I began to train with purpose. Each day, I pushed myself a little harder, ran a little farther, and dreamed a little bigger. It wasn't about speed or competing with others. It was about discovering my limits and then breaking them. I started following a structured routine, learning about proper nutrition, strength training, and the importance of recovery. These weren't just actions. They were affirmations of my commitment to myself. The transformation wasn't just physical. I began to notice changes in how I carried myself, how I spoke, and how I saw the world. The person staring back at me in the mirror wasn't the same one who used to hide in the shadows, avoiding attention. This version of me stood taller, with a spark of confidence in her eyes. But as I grew stronger, the world around me seemed to take notice in unexpected ways. People who had once dismissed me as unfit now watched with curiosity, and even admiration. Former classmates, the ones who used to snicker and point during gym class, started sending messages on social media. "Wow, I saw your race photos. So inspiring," one wrote. "You've really changed," another commented. At first, their praise felt strange, almost hollow. Where was this support when I was struggling, when I was at my lowest? But as I reflected on it, I realized something important. Their opinions no longer held power over me. Whether they approved of my journey or not, it didn't define my worth. The only validation I needed was my own. One message stood out, though. It was from Mia, a girl I hadn't thought about in years. Back in school, she had been the star athlete, the one who seemed to excel effortlessly at everything. We had never been friends, and if I'm honest, I had always resented her. But her message surprised me. "Hey," she wrote, "I just wanted to say how amazing it's been to watch your transformation. Honestly, I've struggled a lot with my own fitness recently, and seeing your dedication has really motivated me to start again. Thank you for being an inspiration." Her words left me stunned. Me? An inspiration? To someone like her? It was a moment of clarity, a reminder that everyone has their struggles, no matter how perfect their lives may seem from the outside. And in that moment, I realized that my journey wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing others, especially those who felt unfit like I once did, that change was possible. With that realization came a new goal: to help others. I started sharing my story, writing about my struggles, my setbacks, and my victories. I posted photos and videos of my training, not to show off, but to connect with people who might see themselves in me. The messages poured in, people thanking me for my honesty, for reminding them that they weren't alone. One day, I was approached by a local community group that organized fitness programs for beginners. They had seen my posts and wanted me to lead a workshop. The idea terrified me. Who was I to teach anyone? But then I thought about all the times I had wished for someone to guide me, to tell me that I could do it. Maybe I could be that person for someone else. The workshop was a mix of nervous energy and pure joy. People of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds showed up, each with their own stories of struggle and self-doubt. As I stood in front of them, sharing my journey, I saw something familiar in their eyes. Hope. We started small, with basic stretches and light jogging. Some people struggled, others excelled, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were there, showing up for themselves. As the weeks went by, I watched them grow, not just in strength but in confidence. And with each step they took, I felt my own purpose solidify. The label unfit had once been a weight on my shoulders, a barrier I thought I could never overcome. But now I saw it for what it really was, a stepping stone. It had pushed me to prove that I was so much more than a label, so much more than what others thought of me. With every passing day, I found myself stepping further into a role I never imagined for myself. That of a leader, a motivator, and an example of perseverance. The workshop I had hesitantly agreed to lead grew beyond my expectations. What started as a small group of beginners blossomed into a supportive community of people eager to change their lives. And in them, I saw reflections of my own journey, the struggles, the triumphs, and the courage to keep going. I became deeply invested in their stories. There was Ahmed, a middle-aged father who had spent years ignoring his health, now running alongside his teenage son as they encouraged each other to push through every lap. There was Sarah, a young woman who had never been active but dreamed of running her first 5K, her determination shining brighter with every session. And then there was Bilal, an elderly man whose slow but steady progress reminded me that it's never too late to start. Each of them carried their own battles, their own insecurities, but they showed up day after day. Watching them transform wasn't just inspiring, it was humbling. It reminded me of the reason I had started this journey in the first place. To reclaim my power, to rewrite my story, and to inspire others to do the same. As the community grew, so did my confidence in my ability to make a difference. I began collaborating with local organizations to organize events, from fun runs to motivational talks. I shared my experiences at schools, talking to students who, like me, had once felt left out and dismissed. I told them about the girl who couldn't run a mile without stopping, who thought she would always be unfit. And then I told them about the person I had become, someone who didn't let those labels define her. But despite all the growth and achievements, life still had its challenges. There were setbacks, days when I doubted myself, when old fears and insecurities tried to creep back in. Sometimes the pressure of being an inspiration felt overwhelming. I worried about letting people down, about not being enough. On one particularly difficult day, I found myself sitting on the same park bench where I had first decided to start running. The memories flooded back, the fear, the doubt, and the pain of those early days. But as I looked around, I saw something different. The track was filled with people, some walking, some running, others cheering from the sidelines. And among them I saw familiar faces, those who had joined my workshop, each of them taking their own steps toward change. It was then that I realized something profound. Progress isn't a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable, and often filled with setbacks. But every step, no matter how small, is a step forward. And in those moments of doubt, I reminded myself of the strength I had found in the journey itself. In time, I decided to take on an even bigger challenge: a marathon. The idea seemed impossible at first, but I knew it was the next step in my growth. Training for a marathon was grueling, both physically and mentally. There were days when my legs felt like they couldn't take another step, and nights when exhaustion left me questioning why I was even trying. But with every mile, I learned more about myself. I learned about resilience, about the power of setting goals, and about the importance of celebrating small victories along the way. The marathon wasn't just a race. It was a culmination of everything I had worked for, a testament to how far I had come, not just in fitness but in life. The day of the marathon was electric. Thousands of runners gathered at the starting line, each with their own reasons for being there. As I stood among them, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. The crowd buzzed with energy, and the air was thick with anticipation. When the race began, I settled into my rhythm, focusing on one step at a time. The journey wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to stop, when fatigue threatened to overtake me. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered why I was there. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed she was unfit, incapable, and unworthy. And I thought about the person I had become, someone who had proven time and again that she was so much more. Crossing the finish line was a moment of pure triumph. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the magnitude of what I had accomplished. It wasn't just about the marathon. It was about everything that had led me to that moment. I had taken the pain, the doubt, and the rejection of my past and turned it into something beautiful, something powerful. Crossing the marathon finish line was a pivotal moment, but it was far from the end of my journey. In many ways, it felt like a new beginning. The girl who had once felt small and insignificant now stood tall, a testament to what determination and self-belief could achieve. But I knew this wasn't just my victory. It belonged to every person who had ever been told they weren't enough, every soul who had faced the same doubts I once had. As I reflected on the road I had traveled, I realized how much my life had changed in ways I could never have imagined. Running had become more than just a physical activity. It was a metaphor for resilience, for moving forward even when the odds were stacked against you. Every step I took had been a declaration of independence from the labels and limitations others had tried to impose on me. The ripple effect of my journey continued to surprise me. After the marathon, more opportunities came my way. Schools invited me to speak to students about overcoming challenges. Fitness centers reached out, asking me to share my story to inspire their members. Even local media took notice, featuring me in articles and interviews as a symbol of perseverance. But the most meaningful moments weren't in the spotlight. They were in the quiet, personal exchanges with individuals who found strength in my story. People of all ages and backgrounds reached out to tell me how my journey had sparked something in them. "I've started walking again after years of doubting myself," one person wrote. Another said, "Your story reminded me that it's never too late to start over." These messages fueled my determination to keep going, to continue proving that change is possible for anyone willing to fight for it. But with this newfound visibility came a responsibility I hadn't anticipated, the responsibility to stay authentic. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I felt like I had to maintain an image of perfection, to live up to the expectations people now had of me. But I reminded myself that my story wasn't about being flawless. It was about being real. It was about showing the world that strength comes from vulnerability, that success is built on a foundation of failures and setbacks. To keep myself grounded, I stayed connected to the community that had supported me from the beginning. The workshops I led became more than just fitness sessions. They became safe spaces for people to share their struggles, their dreams, and their victories. We celebrated every milestone, no matter how small, because each one was a step toward a better version of ourselves. One of the most profound moments came during a community event I organized, a charity run to raise awareness for mental health. Hundreds of people showed up, each wearing shirts that read, "Every step counts." The energy that day was palpable, a collective reminder that we were all in this together. As I stood at the starting line, surrounded by people who had embraced this journey alongside me, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. But even as I celebrated these achievements, I knew my story wasn't finished. There were still challenges to face, still ways to grow and give back. The labels others had once placed on me were long gone, replaced by the identity I had forged through effort and determination. Yet, there was one final chapter one needed to write, not for the world but for myself. It was time to face the biggest challenge of all, forgiving the voices of my past. The ones who had called me unfit, who had laughed, doubted, and dismissed me. Their words had hurt, but they had also shaped me. Without their judgment, I might never have found the drive to prove them wrong. As I prepared to close this chapter of my life, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the weight of their words. I didn't need their validation or their apologies. What I needed was to release the power they once held over me, to let go of the pain and step fully into the life I had built for myself. And so, with one final race ahead of me, the race to fully reclaim my story, I laced up my shoes once more, ready to cross the ultimate finish line. The final race wasn't a marathon or a charity run. It wasn't about medals, times, or even the distance. It was something far more personal, a symbolic culmination of everything I had endured and everything I had become. I decided to return to the place where my journey began, the school track where I had once felt so out of place. It had been years since I'd set foot there, but the memories remained vivid. The laughter of classmates as I struggled to keep up, the humiliation of being chosen last for teams, the sting of feeling like I didn't belong. This time, though, I walked onto that track with a different perspective. The same girl who had once avoided gym class now stood tall, carrying the lessons and strength of every step she had taken since. I wasn't here to prove anything to anyone else. I was here to honor the girl I used to be and the woman she had become. The sun was setting as I tied my shoes, the sky painted with hues of orange and pink. The track was empty, its silence a stark contrast to the noise that had once filled it. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill my lungs, and started to run. Each step felt like a release. I let go of the taunts, the doubts, and the pain that had held me back for so long. I let go of the anger I had carried toward those who had judged me. And most importantly, I let go of the fear that I wasn't enough. As I rounded the final curve of the track, I found myself smiling. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude for the challenges that had shaped me, for the strength I had discovered, and for the journey that had brought me here. Crossing the invisible finish line, I slowed to a walk, my heart pounding with exhilaration. I looked around, taking in the stillness of the track, and felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This wasn't the end of my story. It was a new beginning. I realized then that the labels others had placed on me were never about me. They were a reflection of their own limitations and biases. And by refusing to let those labels define me, I had rewritten my narrative. I was no longer unfit. I was unstoppable. As I left the track that evening, I felt lighter than I ever had before. My journey wasn't about becoming perfect. It was about becoming whole. And in doing so, I had discovered a truth that would stay with me forever. The world may call you many things, but only you have the power to decide who you are. And I was more than enough.